How are you? Okay, good to go.
Well, good morning. This is Thursday, March 13th, 2025, and this is the regular meeting of the Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee for Tompkins County. So we'll call to order and ask if there are any changes to the agenda this morning. Not seeing any. Do we have any public comment this morning? This meeting is going to go quickly. Let's take the minutes of February 13th, please. Someone want to move those? Randy moves, Veronica seconds. Discussion? Ready to vote? Those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. I did want to mention that Shauna Black is excused this morning. We have advisory board appointments. I think we have just one to the Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee, Carmen Arroyo Pernas. Anybody want to? Veronica moves that. Is there a second? Seconded by Deborah. Questions or anything about that one? Deborah?
Was Carmen working in the Office of Human? Okay. I was just curious if it was the same person. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All those in favor? Any opposed? Did you need a motion?
You got it.
Okay. My report, I was going to mention, there it is on my calendar. Let's not forget we've got the budget briefing coming up on Thursday, March 20th, and that's going to be at Rice. And do you want to mention anything about that? I know you sent out an email on it, Norma.
I was going to do that during the report for the county administrators.
Okay, we'll come up to that. Veronica, do you want to update us on WDIC?
Sure, thank you. While we're moving right along, WDCI met on February 26th, and we've had a full-fledged meeting since then where I said we brainstormed goals for the committee for the year, and we'll solidify those at our next meeting. I think the couple things I wanted to bring up here was, one, in the discussion of goals, or two things. The climate survey came up, which we are assuming we're still planning to do in 2026. And the two things brought up were the importance of making sure there's follow-up from whatever comes from the climate survey, which there's been abundant follow-up since last time. That was also 7 years ago. And this is just a thing that was requested to keep in mind when structuring it. And I also brought up the question, since this came up in our budget discussions last year, of is it important, is it important or necessary to have some outside entity running the climate survey? And as opposed to just make a form and send it to people or something. And nobody said it wasn't important, and multiple people said, yes, it is very important to have an outside entity for multiple reasons. One, the trust in the anonymity of it, and two, that in analyzing the data, it's kind of like
Avoiding bias.
Yeah. It's like you don't financially audit yourselves, you have someone else do it, and this is sort of a workplace climate audit in a sense. Not really, I'm trying to avoid that word. And then one other thing that came up was wondering about the relationship between WDIC, and here's what I don't know, and the Affirmative Action Officer, which is a title that someone in our organization has to have. Ruby currently has it, I believe. And
Is that a state requirement or federal? What is it?
It's mostly for the grants. Any grants that are applied for, we have to certify that affirmative action measures were taken, that kind of thing. But
Even under the current administration?
well, that hasn't changed yet. The grant paperwork really just requires the affirmative action officer to certify that efforts were made as far as wages, that kind of
Right.
thing. And it's sign off.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask, we should know this, but like, what do you do? And
Hopefully not much.
Okay.
Because it's not a debt title that's actually involved in the preparation of the contract or any of that. It's really just to certify that the reports that are sent, the efforts made in the grant are true. So
Okay.
it's purely signatory.
And is affirmative action officer a particular title that grants look for?
In the past, yes. It's stated in the grant paperwork. I'm not sure what changes are going to be made in that, but it's really stated for a signature of the affirmative action officer, and the county designates a person. And we also have to keep in mind that all of this was done prior to the county creating the position of the Chief Equity and Diversity Officer.
Right. Thank you. Well, that's simpler than I thought it might be. Realize just another hat for you to wear. And that's all I have for WDIC today.
Do we have questions or comments? Randy?
I do. So does the Workforce Diversity Inclusion Committee, does it focus just on the county's employees, or does it look at agencies as well, or how does that work?
What a good question. It doesn't have rigid boundaries, I think, in what it focuses on. We've had, I don't know, Ruby looks like she has something to say, but we've discussed how it is, well, here, I have the purpose up, which I won't read the whole thing, but it's to serve in an advisory capacity to various people on issues relating to diversity and inclusion in employment and service within the Tompkins County workforce, but also to encourage equality of treatment in employee and customer service within Tompkins County on any basis, including various protected classes. So I don't know that we've discussed like employees of agencies specifically, but it's like more focused on the internal county workforce, but also the like county organization workforce, but also the broader county as a whole. And of course, understanding that those things are highly related. Like ideally we're hiring folks from the county. There's like not a rigid barrier between this organization's workforce and the workforce climate overall.
The reason I ask, because I hear about various agencies and things that they're doing and grants that they receive. And CC received a grant recently from somebody out of the area, non-federal or state related, and they're going to be training 6 women on how to work on HVA systems and heat pumps and those kinds of things. And then there's another one they're doing that's another marginalized group. And so I was curious how that's all collected and if it's important and how is that shared with other people, because I mean, I know it, but you know, nobody else here does that. And they got, I think, $750,000 over 2 years for this program. And they're part of the, Aloja, who is part of that program. This is separate from that somewhat, but I just want to know how that's collected and how it's important. So that was my question.
Thank you. That's a good question. I don't have a good answer. And my first step would be to go ask Chris Spahn from our Workforce Development Department.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for Veronica? Thank you for that report, Veronica. All right, let's move on to the county administrator's report, and Norma Jane is with us.
Good morning, thank you. We had, at 2 meetings ago, I was away for the last one because on vacation, thank you very much. We had a request for American Rescue Act plan and where we've spent those funds, and we prepared a report, an online report that's available through our county page. I don't know if you want me to go ahead and share that with you today. I'm happy to do that.
I think we got time. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. All right, I'm going to start at the beginning, just to kind of show you, because we have the new website, most everybody knows that. We have a county administration budget and finance information page, and on that page, you'll see that there's the American Rescue Plan Act report. Within the report, we put a little content here, but each one of the major groupings have been identified within this page. Capital programs, government services, nonprofits, health and human services, other, and agency. And as best we could, within each of these pages, we've identified which ones went through the Community Recovery Fund. So I won't click around to everything, but just as an example, I'll click into the capital projects. It explains kind of the high level, what we've spent so far, or I should say spent or obligated so far for projects, what has been, what we're using those funds for, and then a breakdown in the reports. And these should look pretty familiar to you because you all have been looking at OpenGov reports for a couple of years now. You'll see that we've identified what's been dispersed and what's not been dispersed. Of course, everything has been obligated as required by the rules of the American Rescue Plan. So if you all have questions, I'll just highlight, if you're on this page, the categories are here, so you can quickly shift from category to category to be able to look at where these funds have been spent. But this was, again, in response to what you folks had asked for a couple of months ago. As Samantha in our office provides reports to the federal government, we'll be updating this so you can see how much has been dispersed and how much is still available, or has been unspent, excuse me. Are there questions on this?
Lots of questions. Let's Veronica, then Lee, then Randy.
Sure.
Just about the categories in navigating this, what does the agency category mean as distinct from the others?
Well, this is mostly much of this has been allocated through the Community Recovery Fund project. And you'll see that the agencies, much of the funding has gone to the Human Services Coalition for multiple agencies as well as cooperative extension. So that's what the agencies category. So they're not county departments. They're outside of the county.
NGOs.
Sorry?
NGOs, yeah.
Sorry, even though, like, if I click on Health and Human Services, there's also agencies outside the community listed there. So I guess are those six categories you can click on supposed to be non-overlapping, or?
They are non-overlapping. Correct. Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So, yeah, that's fair. So Health and Human Services, we have bangs. Again, these are Community Recovery Fund allocations through Health and Human Services. These are the categorizations that we have to use. I should qualify this with the federal government. This is the way they've been qualified. So we're keeping everything very consistent. Within the Health and Human Services, we approved funding for Bangs Ambulance and Groton Community Health through the Community Recovery Fund to support their critical care and replacement of some hot water tanks out at the health centers to keep that going. So I guess those are the differences between. We have kind of this general, mostly human service agencies that have been kind of agencies that we've funded through county departments and budget, and then the human services have been ones that have gone through contract for Community Recovery Fund, primarily. I don't think there's, with the exception of whole health.
Okay. Lee?
A couple of questions. the ultimate success of the use of these funds, when we look at them, you know, it's pretty obvious if, with the capital projects, that they've gone towards something we can see and feel. And I guess the two questions I've got would be on the positions, and there's a fair number of them in here that are listed that receive some reimbursements, and I'm thinking on the majority of those were reimbursements for certain work done during the COVID or pandemic response. And I know in the healthcare side, there were incentives and that type of thing that had to be put in. So if they are funding positions, are we going to be seeing those coming back in the budget process, or was there a lot of one-time money in there?
That's a good question. I think for the most part, they were one-time in nature, but I know at one point in time, a couple of years ago, we had used some ARPA funds to cover the Community Justice Center, when we know that position has come back a couple of times since then, and we've used fund balance to cover those positions. So I can't say for sure that they won't come back, but I believe that most of these are one-time positions.
Okay. And then a number of programs that, case management, Law New York reentry, parolee housing case, that type of thing. Were there measures out there to let us know how well those types of initiatives did during the funding period?
Yeah, we collect quarterly reports. So right now, what I'm showing you is our funding, but we have been collecting quarterly reports which have some performance indicators, which we could probably add to this set of data. It's not been done yet, but it could be.
Just curious, because if we do start to see the requests come in to continue what's been funded through ARPA, that's
whether or not you want to continue that program.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
I think that's fair. Before we would make something permanent and use taxpayer money, we would, want to know if it was worth it.
I see Samantha's on, so without a doubt, she has just made note of that question. We will follow up on that tomorrow.
Randy.
I appreciate the report, by the way.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you for the report. It's good detail. Does complete mean that all the funds have been expended?
Yes.
Okay. And so if it's blank, it means it's still a pending project?
Yes, we, likely, it's one that we haven't received because we don't use any funds unless we've got clear receipts and such for the project being done. So it's likely that those are pending. Yeah.
So if I remember correctly, the MRB group is no longer going to be, their contract ends or had?
Correct. It ended at the end of February.
So all this falls on administration now to
Correct.
follow up and put all this information in OpenGov, and
Yes.
how is that going? Is that?
Well, so far, we're keeping up. Yeah. We have April will come and we will be beginning to collect budgets and having those conversations. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, for the time being, we're doing okay.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Norma, let me just ask, and then I'll get you, Deb. Am I correct that none of this, the money that hasn't been spent yet is, we expect to be subject to clawback?
Presently, we do not expect any of those to be subject. We were working very hard to follow all the pieces, all the funding streams, and I think right now we have nothing that should be clawed back. Everything has been reasonably allocated to projects.
I won't hold you to it, but thank you for that comment. Deb?
I don't really have a question. I know that you're required by the federal government and by our community recovery fund project to track all this stuff, but it's still, I know, a lot of work, and thank you for putting it in such an accessible and orderly way.
You're welcome, yeah, and Samantha has been doing a tremendous amount of work to chase down the vouchers and such, so I really appreciate her work. Yeah. Okay, any other questions on that report? All right, and you can continue to, we'll update that as we have the quarterly reports done, so you'll have kind of updated information. You can ask questions anytime of me or Samantha. Just the couple of other topics, as Mike mentioned, we have a training scheduled on March 20th at 2 o'clock at the Race Conference Room, which is 55 Brown Road. This is an internal training and not a public meeting. This session is designed for legislators and budget preparers to enhance the understanding of budget process, and we'll have a consultant that provides some additional information about how, just generally how budgets are done across other municipalities. The retreat's going to include a discussion afterward with legislators and department heads, and we've received about 11 responses from county departments just in some general questions or some conversation that we'll be sharing at the meeting. And then I've sent out a request for some information from the legislators. Last I looked, I had one legislator who's responded so far, but just it's really meant to be a discussion starter for the conversation afterward.
Deborah?
Yeah, I was wondering at what stage in this process this year we're going to start talking about some sort of mechanism, not zero-based budgeting, because we can't just shift to that all at once, but some mechanism to address the concerns that many of my colleagues have expressed about examining the monies we're already spending, the programs we're already funding, the positions we're already funding, and whether or not they need to continue.
Well, I can't, if
Yeah,
just respond.
I just wondered when we're going to talk about that.
A little second part of my report today was that Corsa and I have been working on concepts for how we approach the budget review. And we've been talking with the department heads about how we started out kind of talking about zero-based budgeting with department heads, and we've talked about how to track what we've deemed as over-target requests and looking at maybe a different way of capturing that information as an overage in having folks just prepare a line item budget as what they need to continue maintenance of effort expenses for the year, and then reviewing those against the 5-year trend of actuals to see kind of where we land. So we're doing some back-end work on this, talking with departments. So far, most departments have had no problem. I mean, I think that taking the targets away is a big leap right now because folks have been quite used to budgeting based on a fiscal target, but certainly having everything in one line item budget, maybe not looking at the over targets as we've traditionally done. And again, this would be something we talk about during training, but looking at it more of these are the initiatives that are new to the department for the year, and are these the things that we want to increase the budget for? But looking at the baseline, just for example, I'll pick ITS for a second, and I know that they have increases in their software. There's no question software is going up, right? So we don't really have, those are maintenance of effort. We can't really control those fixed costs. So the concept would be to enter the fixed costs in the line item budget, whether they really fit within the fiscal target or not, and then identify those items that were new initiatives, and then Corsa and I will be going over these with the departments, talking about, okay, so this is what you've spent over the last 5 years, how is this trend being affected by what you're requesting? And hopefully we'll have a better that will be a better mechanism for the county legislature to react to, just to be able to say, okay, these are the things that are really truly new initiatives. These are the things that really truly are things we can't control spending on, and then we can work through those. So I don't know if that actually answered your question, but it is
it's not just the new things. I mean,
no, it's maintenance of effort as well, right?
Yeah.
But those are things that we can't, the costs that we can't control, we can't control. I mean, we've got increases in contracts that across the county that actually Samantha's working on now, trying to find out what those contract increases are. So we'll be able to identify those within the line item as well through itemizations.
okay.
So, Deb, to answer your question, I think it's a reasonable thing to start, this committee to start talking about. And I think it would make sense to do it after we have our budget meeting later this month. And so maybe we could put it on the agenda for next time. It may be something we've got to ask the program committees to start looking at, rather than this committee looking at everything.
Agreed.
As I recall, we asked them last year and the year before to gather the information about what the departments that report to them are actually doing, and it hasn't really worked out all that well.
And I will say from my conversations with department heads, they want to do that. They want to share what they're doing. They want to share what's been, how the programs work. I think that would be very well received by departments to have an opportunity to come in with their information about what they do and how things are changing and what the pain points are and the emerging trends, and all of that would be very helpful to have those conversations with the program committees.
That's not exactly the conversation they have with the expanded budget committee when they come in.
No.
So
Right,
I think we need to communicate
too
to our
condensed.
colleagues that those conversations need to be happening. I don't know if they should happen in committee, or we should shift the focus of the presentations to the EBC. One way or another, I think we need that information.
Veronica?
I agree that information would be helpful. It sounds like, Norma, what you and Corsa have been talking about and talking with the department heads is good. I do, in terms of how to get it, Deborah, this committee, other committees, I think that the legislators probably don't, Lee might always be an exception, having been a department head, but that I don't know if we know what to ask for exactly, because I don't know how the department heads keep track of their own programs and their own funding. We see the brief expanded budget committee presentations. We see their budget in the OpenGov budget book last year. But surely they've got much more than that, because they're not going to just have something like program expense, a bunch of dollars not specified. So I guess what I'm saying here is I think we need, the questions that you're asking, Deborah, that are good, and I want to know the answers to as well, need to be answered in concert with our administration and with the staff who kind of know what they're doing. I was thinking when you were showing the ARPA report, I was thinking this and then I didn't say it, but now I'm going to say it, that the level of detail there is obviously mandated to exist by the federal government, and then the transparency and showing it on a website is fantastic, and I think a lot of people from the public would really appreciate that. And I was wondering if there is any, how plausible it would be to move in that direction for just regular county programs and operations. And the big difference there from what we have now, but I understand that reporting anything is a lot of work, and that you are all already doing a lot of work. I think the big difference from what we have now is that on the ARPA funding report, each line is it has a description of what it's for that is probably meaningful to the random person reading it, as opposed to a sort of something program expense, salary, fringe. I mean, we know what those are, but not, what do the positions do? What does this program do? That kind of thing. Yeah. And then I guess the last thing I was going to say is I'd love for the departments to share what are the programs, more about what they're doing, and even to be able to look at the whole budget and not just assume that target comes year after year. But also, I think that if we're asking them to do that, we, the legislators, should acknowledge and understand that it's really disruptive to just end a program or like, so I do worry, and I don't know, department heads can bring this up, but I do worry that like, if we're asking, tell us more about the programs you're doing, some of them might hear it understandably as, tell us more about the program so that we can maybe like yank them out if we don't like them and we think that they're, or maybe that we don't understand them and therefore we think it's not worth spending money on them. And I don't know how to like manage the legislature's attitude around that, but I think that's a concern I want to bring up.
So can I respond a little bit to?
Go ahead.
So I think that part of what I think we need to make sure we all keep in mind is that the county administrator you hired, the county administration office is here to kind of help you go through these things in those kinds of details. So it's really up to, and that's the plan, is to go through those budgets truly line by line with the departments and not put that burden on the legislature to do that kind of work. And then what would happen is, and I don't know whether the course is on or not, but what would happen is then we would bring back those things that are a question, whether or not you want to continue to fund. But that's really, that kind of detail is generally something that the county administrator would be involved in.
I don't know which was first, Lee, then Randy.
Lee was first.
Veronica's kind of headed in the direction where I've been thinking on it. And we adopted these budget processes more or less in 1995. And it really came down to program-based budgeting. And the thing that I've always wrestled with is what's within a program. And so it's not so much judging a wholesale program, but we don't delve into, because of the way the targets work, what's contained within the program. And you might have one program with 20 services. And, and I'll cheat a little bit, or tell you where I cheated a little bit as a department head, was that I grouped a lot of stuff underneath coordination, for instance, with emergency services. Well, that included fire services, emergency medical services, emergency management, but it was all grouped together, and usually because people were working across the three areas, but they comprised one program. And we've never got to a point where we evaluate the particular services or initiatives within those programs. And I think that may be where we struggle a little bit, because we aren't going to cancel a whole program. But is there something within there that we're funding that maybe it's past its time?
But we still have program base. We still have those programs. I
Right.
remember that, Lee. But, and at that point in time, we did have narratives by program, and then
Yeah.
each program had maybe 5 functional units underneath of it, and then the broader department then rolled into that program. So that definitely is still a mechanism that we have. And maybe that's something that, while the departments are budgeting by functional units under their departments, but there's not really a reason why we couldn't go back and ask departments if they could provide us with details based on the program. So like with Lori's department, she has treasury, she has purchasing, she has finance. Each one of those has a specific function within that department. There's not really a reason why we couldn't get that kind of, I believe that those narratives are probably out there. Yeah.
And some of it was supported by revenues at that time, and you structured it accordingly in order to follow that revenue line back to some source. And I don't know if those are still legitimate with the changes that have happened, but we've continued forward with what was set up many decades ago, and maybe it's still valid, but I suspect a lot's changed in 30 years.
If I may, Lee, at one point, we did have a separate book with all the programs in it for the legislature. It didn't get used a lot, and I think that's probably why it went away. But but that was attempted by administration quite a few years ago.
Yeah, I know Bridget and I have been working on the key performance indicators as well, and there'll be a portion of that would be public, and that really might be the way to review those.
I think Randy was next, then Deb.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I like where this conversation is going. I agree with Deborah. I think it should be a little more detailed on what we're looking for. And I like the idea of various departments reporting to whatever committees they report to with this information before we get to the budget meetings. And I'll pick on Kate Shanks Booth because I see she's here just as an example. Okay, so the
She'll love you for that.
I'm not picking on you, but so for example, they at one time I think we're 5 employees, then they went down to 4, and then to 3. Now you're back to 4, and the programs that you're providing are, I support, of course, but understanding them much better and really the benefit that we're getting for your department or from your department would be helpful for me. And I think that they really should report to the committees before a budget committee. And with our budget information, for example, for youth services, you get funding from the state and other areas that you don't really know what that funding is going to be until it comes in sometimes. So understanding the budget before we get to this thing in September, where we are in a particular, like say June, hey, here's how our budget looks. Here's our income. We talked about this before, this is our budget income. Did it come in or not? I mean, if you don't know those things, you're really just guessing. So I'd like to know more about that.
Deborah.
Yeah, I was going to say that idea of having a book that outlines all the programs, I know it's a lot of work for someone, but given that you're going to have 9 new legislators next session, this would be a good time to start putting that information together because they're going to have to take a crash course in understanding what the heck it is they're overseeing. But I'm wondering too if it wouldn't make sense to have individual legislators who are assigned to or are willing to voluntarily work with specific department heads, the way we work with our direct reports, to find out learn what that department or those departments actually do and what their programs involved and what services they're providing. We're going to have to trust each other in an arrangement like that to be objective and not necessarily champion their department, but to offer our colleagues a realistic assessment of what those departments are doing and where we might make cuts or we might make changes. I mean, I don't want to be sending emails out asking people for 5 things they did last week, but if DOGE had actually reviewed that information and used it surgically with precision to make decisions about who they were going to keep and who they were going to get rid of, rather than just make wholesale cuts and then realize, oh, whoops, nobody's overseeing our nuclear weapons. I think the basic idea of DOGE or whatever the heck it is, if it had been implemented properly, was a good one. But, it's a dumpster fire the way they've actually done it. We could do a better job of something similar.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Go ahead, Veronica.
Oh, it just looked like Kate maybe had something to say in response to the discussion.
Yeah, I think that, for what it's worth, I'm a smaller department, and I think as you're thinking about how to get in, there's a level of the weeds that you kind of are asking to get into, and I think that can take, as you said, more time to sort of separate that out. I think what you'll find is that through this process, being a smaller department, it's a lot easier for people who may not understand the ins and outs of everything that we do to sort of dig in a little bit deeper than you would, say, a budget at DSS or at, or whole health, simply because they run so many more programs. I think, I speak for my colleagues that, we try to be very good stewards of the funds that were allotted. And I think that while it is true that programs have shifted over the years, I mean, my program will be around, our department will be around 50 years in 2027. It's not the same programs that it was when we started. We as a department, and I think my colleagues really pride ourselves on staying atop of the trends and really making sure that we're trying to spend the money in a way that's addressing the needs of the community. So having that conversation is not something that we are going to shy away from. I think that we'll absolutely want to do that. I think it's trusting your colleagues, but it's also ensuring that we can build that trust between department heads and legislatures to understand that it's going to be a fair process. It's not apples to apples. So that we don't have a tendency to do sort of wrap everything into one thing and call it something. I mean, not that my colleagues are doing that, but sort of to Lee's point, I think the level of transparency is needed and long overdue. But I think that trusting the county administrator to help with that process will make that a lot easier, because the amount of time that it would, it's taken 6 years. On the 11th, I've been here 6 years. And just now, I feel like I'm getting a grasp of all the ins and outs in the different municipalities and how things work. And that's on my scale. So the knowledge and the content experts of our department heads, I think, can be an absolute resource. And I would really encourage you to use those folks and talk to them, and also use Corsa as he's learning. And I think we are also really excited about the possibility to figure out how to share information and train and support those new county legislators as they come on, because we know that that's very important. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents. Not that you asked, but I hope it helps. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you for that, Kate. Anything else on this topic? All right. What else have you got, Norma?
I just wanted to follow up and let you know that as kind of part of the conversation with WDIC, the procurement contract software that you approved a year ago is being implemented now. And within that, the procurement portion, we are collecting a lot of information about the diversity, the requirements that the federal government has for which diversity points for those grants and RFPs and funding. So I wanted you to know that we have been working toward that, and that is in there so that the vendors can include that information with their responses. And then just finally, just to remind folks that we do have a labor negotiation that's going to have to start soon for the corrections division, and that's the end of this year, and then we will have blue collar for 2026. So all of those are also part of the goals for county administration to move those along.
I think Shauna and I have got the corrections one.
All right.
Randy?
Are you done with your report?
I am done.
Great, so I have a question, thank you. But I have a question for you. So we exchanged a few emails about the capital plan. And last year and year before, you provided good data and some graphs and whatnot on what's happening to our capital expenditures each year and how it's slowly declining. Plus, we put funds that we had to pay off some debts early. It'd be nice to see where that trend is going in a graph, but also how that trend is going to change when we, probably not in this particular legislature, start approving funds for the new building, for the public safety building, how those are going to kind of cross. I would actually like to see this legislature approve the Centerville building this year. I'm not sure we're going to get there for that. But I'd like to understand where that's going to meet. So this is coming down, it's going to start going up, and to see where our top ceiling is for our capital plan and what we're costing each month. If we add in the public safety building is on top of the Centerville building, and then the other projects that are happening, to understand our total debt potential. So.
Yeah.
Okay, is that
Yeah,
request is noted?
that work's begun. I just will say that there's a lot of unknowns about how much the center government building will cost. So for me to, I mean, I've guessed as best we can but it's, with all of the changes and considering whether or not we do geothermal, I mean, there's a lot of variables that will significantly increase costs as we move forward, so we really have to.
Can we build it without steel and aluminum?
I mean, I think that's, yeah, and maybe just all glass, I don't know. But
Wood.
yeah.
Wood.
No windows.
But not Canadian lumber.
I think,
Oh, no, we'll get it from all those public forest lands that,
I think Norma's point is well taken, because personally, I think that the expanse of the center of government building will push the cost up considerably from what estimates we've been using. But we'll have to wait and see. All right, anything else for Norma? Norma, thank you for that report.
You're welcome.
Let's move on to Lori Scarrett, our Director of Finance.
Good morning. This morning, I would like to have a discussion and get some guidance and feedback from you all regarding our in-rem tax foreclosure auction. In particularly, I would like to consider going online instead of having an in-person auction for several reasons. I have asked Drew to attend today, as he's got more experience than I have in the auction process and what goes on. So if you have specific questions, he's here to help with those answers.
You want to come up, Lee? Lee. Drew? I'm looking at Lee.
But particularly the last 2 years that I've been here, we've had some controversial foreclosures and individuals that, I don't want to say were threatening, but maybe had the appearance of that. The sheriff's office has been great, and last year provided us an armed individual to come to the auction, and that was welcome. But again, that's at the whim of their availability. So I'm concerned about the safety of not only the staff that attends the auction, but also the public that's coming to the auction. It is in an open building that is not secure. So that's my number one reason for wanting to consider doing an online auction. The second reason is I was a bit amazed last year at the amount of cash that was paid at the auction. Typically, you would expect more checks type situation, but we had a significant amount of cash that we then needed to transport to our office after hours. Not a good situation, and I want to thank the sheriff's office again because they did step up and help us in that. And I think going forward, if we do continue to have an in-person live auction, we need to have a better process for that. And then the third point is just that it is after hours. We have 2 meetings, usually an informational meeting and then the actual auction. So that is staff time, and typically it's overtime for our office for that staff to attend that. So many other counties are currently using online auctions, and there's pros and cons to that as well. But I just wanted to get some guidance from you all to see if this is something I should pursue or, yep, nope, continue as we are, so.
Deborah?
yeah, I don't see any reason why we can't do this. My only question is, these other counties that have shifted to online, have they noticed any change in the income revenues from an online auction versus?
You're asking, does it discourage bidding, or does it?
Yeah, I mean, does it affect how people bid?
How high
and
people
how,
bid, yeah.
Successful the auction is? Because if it doesn't really have an impact on what we pull in from the auction, why wouldn't we do this?
I've heard a couple conflicting reports on the amount of revenue. Some counties have said it has drastically increased because it's opened the pool much wider. And other counties have seen a decrease. So I don't know that we have a really solid answer on the amount of revenue. I think one of the concerns from other counties have been that because it opens the pool, it's not necessarily local people that are purchasing those properties.
I would just add to that is we no longer are concerned that much with the revenue as any overages are available to the property owner. So, you know, obviously we want to do the best as we can for the property owner, but as far as the county budget is concerned, there's really not a whole lot of impact on that.
Yeah, but we want to
Yep.
be sure that we at least
Absolutely.
recover the taxes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And as Lori was saying, I think we heard anecdotally from a number of counties, they saw an increase, especially around COVID periods, but then I've heard that some have pulled back, that it was kind of a 1 or 2 year blip and then some. And I haven't heard for sure, but I have heard a couple counties are going off from it, just because it does have pros and cons, so they want to try it again live.
Interesting.
You say they're going back to a live auction?
Going back to live. Again, I haven't confirmed that, and it's only 1 or 2, but, you know, I think, as Lori said, based on the safety and even what we've run into so far this year, that would be my biggest concern, that we really consider doing a online auction.
Randy?
Yeah, thanks for reviewing what happened last year. Safety obviously would be really important. And I think that if you do in person, and I would actually recommend a hybrid, we need to make sure that it's maybe a better place, a different time, more security, and deal with those issues. I do know an individual who is not computer literate, and he does pay with cash. So there are people that would be, that's just who they are, and it's an older individual. And he does buy properties, and it's crazy what he does. But so I think that if you just have online, it would, for some people, at least this individual, would cut him out. So maybe he could find somebody to help him to do it online. I don't know. So I'm not really a fan of just doing it online.
Lee?
Remind me, we're down to what, about 15 or 20 after the redemption period? Is that what we're averaging, number of parcels? Or is it a little higher than that?
I believe last year there were 9.
9? Yeah.
We're currently at 63, I believe.
Well, you started high last year and then got them down to a pretty good number. But even that ought to factor into the context. If it's only 9 parcels, wow, that's a lot of effort to get everybody in one place.
Yeah, Deb?
Yeah, I just wondered what's the relative cost of using some system or platform that would allow us to do it online versus retaining an auctioneer?
I think the cost would be very similar. We did talk to our auctioneer just to kind of get a feel for, you know, is it an increase, decrease, and the fees would be pretty much the same. It'd be less from our perspective because we wouldn't be paying overtime.
Right.
The sheriff's office probably wouldn't be paying overtime. So from that perspective, it would be.
But you'd still have an auctioneer, is that right?
Yeah.
But you need that for the advertising, for example.
Right.
Yes.
I guess I'm surprised about the cash issue. I would have thought, you know, when I go to an auction, the auctioneer handles the cash and then gives the estate or whoever's sponsoring the auction a check at the end. Why isn't that done with our auctioneer? Any idea?
I don't know, Drew, if you have an answer on that?
I don't. I know because a lot of it is we typically have the county attorney there and our staff to start moving the deeds, and that's how it's been done. I know since I've been here, but I agree with you. I think other auctions, the auctioneer usually takes it and then takes their cut and do that. In our situation, we pay Reynolds Auction currently and make them whole. So, you know, the funds come to us, and I don't know if they want to handle, you know, the amount of cash that could come in.
We could certainly inquire on that.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that. I mean, if we went this direction, I would hope that we would just do it as a trial and not say that we're going to do that forever in the future. And I think you'd have to advertise how you're going to payments. Maybe if you're doing it online, you've got to have credit card or something and not take cash. I don't know.
Yeah, it would, yeah.
We could do both credit card and we could give them like 48 hours to come in with cash or a certified check in the office.
During business hours.
During business
yes.
hours.
Business hours. When
I know that's sort of when you do a mortgage foreclosure, which I've had some experience with, that you really don't expect people to have whatever their down payment is exactly in the courthouse steps. Let's put it that way.
Do we ask for a letter of credit when somebody comes in from a bank or something?
I don't believe we have historically.
No, it's typically and we do accept New York State checks, so they can write a personal check at that auction or cash. As Randy mentioned, we do have a couple individuals that come in cash. Last year, I think, was a surprise because they gave the full purchase payment in cash that day.
Deborah?
I like Mike's idea that we could try it as a pilot and see how it works.
Veronica?
I'm actually struggling to see what the actual benefit of an online auction would be. Maybe setting aside the carrying cash issue, although could you, in an in-person auction, could you still arrange the payment to come in during business hours within 48 hours, like you would online? I guess my concerns about online are, one, Randy's example is good, that it would shift who can participate, and I don't like the idea of making it necessarily easier for out-of-town investors to buy properties. That's not particularly helpful, and it doesn't, do we ever have a problem with a property not getting sold at all? No, okay, Drew's shaking his head.
Ever since I've been here, they've sold. I think the biggest thing we have is our safety. And we've had growing concerns each year. And Lee, I know Rick had you come in a couple of years ago, probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago, on a situation. And I won't go into those details, but each year lately, we've had property owners that we are concerned about.
Thank you. I don't want to minimize the safety concerns, and maybe like sorting out the details is not to be done in a public meeting. I did a quick Google of violence at foreclosure auctions, which is really hard to do because it lots of talks about violence and crime around foreclosures in the community, which is a much bigger issue. The only thing I found was an article from 2018 about someone coming in and to someone's office and smashing up computers to intimidate them because they were running, this was in Greece in 2018, and they were running online auctions weekly. So not to scare anyone, I hope that doesn't happen. But it didn't seem like the onlineness helped. And I guess safety is, I'd love to hear about this more another time, because safety is important, but also we have lots of open to the public things where people I know there's been concerns about people potential violence concerns that were related to foreclosures or other issues that were not about the auction location specifically, but the concerns cropped up in just the everyday course of business. So I don't know, I guess I struggle to see how much moving the auction online would help with that, but I'm open to being wrong.
I think it would be helpful, without going into too much detail, to understand what sorts of safety issues you all have encountered. Because you're there on the ground, we are not.
Maury's got his hand up.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Maury, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add, is that you really have to be there to assess that issue. It's a relatively small room, probably the biggest we have for this, but it's packed. And the building is open, and it's a tense situation. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Okay, so how are we going to leave this? Are we going to say, give Lori the discretion to decide about this?
I would be in favor of that. I mean, why do we have staff? Why do we have professional staff if we don't listen when they say, there's a problem and here's a solution?
Randy?
My only thought that if we decide to do this, somehow we let people know. And so that if somebody does want to bid, that how they can get help with computers and online stuff, so.
I would think that would be part of the advertising.
Yeah.
That we would ask the auctioneers group to do.
And Dave,
Okay.
we would still stay with the same auctioneer, and Dave knows many of the regulars. So we could even ask him to reach out to the regulars and see what help they may need to get.
You'd be surprised walking in the Commons, you think somebody's a bum and they're worth a lot of money. So it's just never know.
They're the millionaire next door, yeah.
Right?
I wish it were me.
It's not me.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention, Lori and Drew. And so I think you've heard us. We think you can go ahead the way you feel is best. But whatever it is, it's going to be a trial.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Other topics? Anything else for Lori? All right, next up is our Commissioner of Human Resources, Ruby Pulliam.
Good morning, everyone. Just a brief report from me today, and I have Heather and Larry here to give you actual reports on some of the programs that we're involved in. First thing is the help program from Civil Service has been extended to June 2026. Larry will actually give you some numbers where we are and the progress we've made so far, but that process of having employees in a non-competitive status without exams to a permanent status has been extended. We've been successful so far, and we're happy for the extension. We're also happy that the state has provided a mechanism for us to already, those employees who have been in that program for 6 months or more, to achieve their permanent status prior to the end of the program, because it keeps getting extended. So we're happy about that, and we've taken steps to submit the request to include that mechanism in our local rules. So more news to come on that.
How long was it extended for?
To June 2026. The date was December 2025.
So another
First,
6 months then.
remember when it first started, it was December 2024. It was extended to December 2025. And because of the success that the local municipalities have achieved, they've extended to 2026. But they've also provided a way that the people who have been waiting since the first program began don't have to wait until the end of the program to become permanent.
So what are we calling this program? What's the
Help.
help?
It's help. It's New York Helps Employees
And so it's just helping them get civil service status quicker.
without the exam. Right. And specific numbers will come in our report. The second thing is, for our local office, we've been trying to make sure that our municipalities and our departments understand civil service processes, have a chance to ask any questions, and us to be a partner with them rather than simply transacting personnel actions. We had a big success with our lunch and learns with our municipalities. We're continuing that, where either staff goes out to the municipalities or we have a group session at the county for them to join us. We're starting our county lunch and learns with our first date, June 18th. So that will allow county departments to come and meet with our staff, ask any questions that they have in relation to civil service, get one-on-one answers, and us to actually see what they're dealing with and how we can assist them. So that's on June 18th. Details will be announced as soon as everything's finalized. Our annual civil service report to the state was submitted prior to the March 1st deadline, and I really am going to give a plug in for the staff. Every year, that report is turned in prior to the deadline. And from my previous employment, we always had to get extensions. So kudos to the staff. And Heather will be reporting on those numbers for you. We have hired or offered the employment for the training and development coordinator's position that you approved for us, and that person will be starting close to April. And remember, the purpose of this position was to coordinate our training and development needs across the county. With the reduction in our actual training and development funds, we are allocating funds for training with a county-wide benefit or that benefits multi-departments. We figure with our coordinator and being able to coordinate the training, different trainings across the county, then we should be able to meet the needs of our employees. We are involved in searches. On the administrative level, the postings for Director of Finance, thanks Lori, Commissioner of Whole Health and Commissioner of Social Services will be posted this week. So we will begin those recruitment processes for those positions. We will present to the committee, the last meeting we had, there were questions asked about the 25-year club dinner and the county picnic, the cost for increasing the numbers or getting it at the level that we had last year. We will prepare that in writing and submit to you. We have total costs right now. I'm trying to get numbers verified. But just to let you know, our reward and recognition budget line is $20,000. Last year for the picnic alone was $39,618. For the dinner was close to $10,000. It was $9,780. So to do it in the way we've begun to do it is more than what we're allocated in our budget, and it causes budget transfers and adjustments. So we will get you those specific figures. So remember, the plan for this year is for the 25-year dinner club is for our current inductees, their guests, the department head of the current inductee, who else are we doing? Speakers, and the ledge and admin, the staff who's working the event. It's still going to be a very nice event. It's just that we haven't opened it up to all of the past inductees or retirees and their guests who just want to come and enjoy the occasion.
So it'll just be smaller,
It will be smaller.
as will the picnic, unless.
Yes.
Okay.
The plan for the picnic is county employees only, not their families. We extended the hours to make it more convenient for employees to actually come to the picnic, but county employees only. And we reduced the number of food trucks that we were less than we normally have.
Okay.
So we will provide that report in writing to you. Are there any questions for me before I hand it over to?
Yeah. Just on the cost and looking forward to receiving those costs, but I think I mentioned last time, it used to be the 25-year dinner, folks paid for that. And I wonder if the folks that are going to be excluded this time might be willing to pay to have that, because that's the one opportunity for retirees to come in that in the past and up until last year, I guess, have always been able to come in and see some of the folks they used to work with, see the people who are joining this group, and I just think it's a nice thing to do. And I don't think asking them to pay the cost of their dinner for that is out of line.
Previously, just on the preliminary numbers, dealing with last year, and last year's numbers are difficult because we had that incident where we had to change dates at the last minute.
Yes.
We had 183 RSVPs initially. Of that 183, 61 were inductees and their guests, the department head of the inductee, and past inductees, as well as the legislators and the staff. The remaining numbers were not necessarily past inductees. They were retirees and their friends. And it is a great social occasion, and we enjoy it just as well. But of that number, only 11 were identified to pay a $20 cost. Only 6 paid the cost. We don't charge past inductees. We don't charge legislators who are participating. Legislators who are just attending pay the cost. We don't charge the inductees and their guests, their +1, or the department head of that guest. So it's difficult to put a number on what we would have to charge and how would we put that number in advance so that we would be prepared to serve them. Okay, I probably went into too many details. I've got 2 hands.
I don't know how
here.
they did it in the past, that's
Right.
all. Deborah, then Veronica?
Yeah, I'm sorry to my colleagues, but I find this frustrating. We've had this conversation before. We all know that we're in an environment, our resources are already limited. We're already facing budget constraints. It's probably going to be a lot worse going forward, given what's going on in Washington. And yet, when we hit a decision like this one, everybody's got their, oh God, it would be so nice if we could do this. It's a great opportunity. I feel like this is not something I want to cut. That's not going to work, folks. You're never, we limited Ruby's budget for these events. We need to stick with that, however unnice it seems. Otherwise, we're just going to eat up all our resources, making exceptions to what we know is a limited budget. So I think whatever Ruby has to do to meet the budget that we gave her, that's what we should be letting her do. Not saying, oh, in this particular case, I want you to do more. It's just like your own personal budget. If you know that your resources are limited and you need to save for a new center of government or a new public safety building, then you got to cut costs where you can.
Veronica?
Ruby, based on what you said, combined with my memory, I think I owe you money for last year's 25-year club dinner. How do I pay you? And I don't know that I was...
See, Heather.
Okay, thanks.
We'll put it toward this year's dinner. And we don't, I've said it a couple of times in a couple of instances, I don't want staff acting as a collection agency.
No.
So we don't turn anyone away.
Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, I just want to thank the Community Mental Health Service Board. They worked quite a bit on the Health Commissioner job description.
Yes.
And I appreciate your patience with them, because I know they spent a lot of hours on that. And their goal was to kind of increase the pool, so to speak, on how the minimum requirements are. So I hope some of those things were included in that.
They
And
were.
thank Corsa for working on it as well. So thank you.
Yeah. And we also had comments and input from the Board of Health. So
Right.
taking care of the public health and mental health aspects of the position.
Thank you.
To Deborah's point, and Deborah, I understand what you're saying, I was trying to look for a way that we might be able to fund it and still have that event happening. And I have to say, these kind of things that we want to try to retain employees and have an inclusive environment for our employees, I think these events are kind of important that we brought on over the last few years. We didn't years ago, have a picnic, for example. It's been very popular with the employees. It's been well attended. And I think we have to think beyond sometimes to the point of what this accomplishes for us, not just a good time, but keeping our employees' morale up, and I think that's pretty important too.
And Mike, might I add to, for every event, we have feedback from employees and those who attend. All of our plans, we formalize and plan according to that feedback, which means changing in venues or what's a favorite we strive to keep. So we still want to provide the recognition and the honor to the employees in a nice event, but we're just doing it on a smaller scale.
Thanks.
And Heather is next for the annual report.
Good morning.
Hello, Heather.
We just submitted the annual report to the state. That is a snapshot of all of the civil service transactions that our office processes within a year's time. Our office provides civil service oversight for all of the county departments, as well as 26 towns, villages, school districts, and special districts. We are processing new hires, separations, title changes, leaves of absences, and pay changes for about 850 county employees and about 1,255 municipal employees. One of the items tracked through the annual report is our provisional rate. These are employees, either county or municipal employees, that have a civil service status of provisional pending the next offered civil service exam for their title. The state typically recommends our provisional rate to be around 5 or 5.5%. From 2019 to 2023, our provisional rate has been anywhere from 6 to 9%. A lot of that is due to COVID and the backlog of civil service testing available from the state. This year, our provisional rate is 4.2%, which shows that the HELP program is helping, and it's doing a great job of reducing our provisional rate. In addition to our annual report, we also have to submit our exam fee report to New York State. In 2024, our office administered 105 exams for about 750 people, and we paid to the state $5,793 for exam prep test booklets. Do I have any questions? Randy?
That's good information. Can I see that in writing somehow? Maybe just to see your actual report that you did. I was surprised by the total number of people that we're servicing outside of the county. So you said 1,000?
1,255.
And do we charge those municipality schools anything for that, or are we allowed to?
By law, the only organization that we're allowed to charge is Education, Board of Education, and that's with the formula. But our rules aren't set up to do that. And usually it's a formula involved getting approval with the state, getting approval by the Board of Education, and we haven't gone through that process.
Okay.
Because usually it's not, in my previous employment, it was a quid pro quo. We used their facilities for testing. We didn't charge them for anything. Here, we don't charge for tests, period. So
right.
It'd be kind of an uneven balance there. But if we were to do that, we would have to go through a process with the state and the Board of Education to do so. And I'm not sure what we will be able to charge.
Okay. I was just curious. It seems like an awful lot. So, and it sounds like it is a lot, right?
It is.
Thanks.
It's an unfunded mandate.
So Heather can provide that actual report, or do you want it just a summary or written report of what she just said? Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, good morning, everybody.
Morning, Larry.
We're going to run down some numbers as we were doing last year. So we have 811 county staff, 326 election workers, and 43 of the JTPAs, the Job Training Partnership Act, the Youth Employment Program, which is a total 854. Recruitment, we have 67 positions on our vacancy page right now. Posted 39 in February. 32 of those were for municipalities and schools, and 7 of those were for county departments. So there's plenty of opportunity out there for folks to visit that vacancy page. Outreach, I attended the URO's Second Chance Employment program last month. That was very educational. I really enjoyed that, made some great connections. Heather and I went to BOCES and did a civil service presentation to the students up there. That's always well received. Also, we helped them with some open interviews, which they hired, I think, 9 people on the spot that day for teachers' aides and some of their really difficult positions to fill. This is our 4th time assisting them with that. And it just seems to be growing and growing up there. So it was great. It's a college job fair, and then the rest of the outreach is me doing my thing. So we had a really good month in February. Applications, we had 390 applications that came through. 10 civil service tests were posted in February. Help submissions. There's been 29 titles at the first of the year, and Heather just said we have another 55 that she has sent on for that health program. So that, Ruby said it's growing. It's growing quickly. Let's see, exit interviews. I did exit interview 1 in February. Onboarding, the new benefits that we're offering for folks was pretty popular. We onboarded 12 people, 10 signed up for the health, 5 for dental, 4 for vision, and a various smattering of the optional ones. Leaves that were processed, so there were 37 disability leaves in February. I know that's something that was asked before. 14 cancer screenings, 12 bereavement, 3 jury, and still 19 COVIDs. That's what I have for you this month.
I just don't know what you people do all day.
Just hang around, hang around.
I would like to say, Ruby, the ITCTC, Transportation Council Policy Committee appreciates the help that Larry's been giving the group trying to find a new director.
Thank you.
Lee?
Just a general question. Do you have any areas that you're not getting good response for vacancies or lists to be prepared? Are there any particular career areas where you're just not getting the numbers you want to see with applicants?
Definitely attorneys. That's been a huge struggle. And the nurses also, which has been typical for a long time now.
That's the one I was afraid you were going to tell me.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the 2 probably that we really struggle, put a lot of time and energy in putting information out there with not a lot of response.
How would you say the market adjustments worked for you in the last year?
I think they were, they helped. They helped, but in those cases, regardless of how we adjust, we cannot compete for some titles. I still think they were pretty good. They're pretty good rates, pretty good salaries, but we cannot compete in some areas. And that's why we really wanted to enhance our benefit offerings, because what we can't do in salary, perhaps we can do in benefits or some other workplace arrangement. Quite a few people are still looking for 100% remote positions. We don't have those. And where they do have them, that's where they can go. So, but I think the market adjustments were sufficient, especially based upon the negotiated increases too. So.
How about retention?
For the most part, I would say our retention issues may not all be salary related. And that's where we're working to partner with departments and try to assist where we can, rather than simply transacting the personnel actions.
Thanks.
Okay. Anything else, Ruby?
That's it.
Thank you all for your reports. I see we've been joined by our County Administrator, Corsa Comfrey. Corsa, was there anything you wanted to say to us this morning?
No, nothing more to add. I think Norma went through a lot of things that we are dealing with at admin and also preparing for the budget process. And I think the discussion on the 20th will be enriched by the thought process that all of you have shared today, and also our engagement with the department. So I look forward to the 20th meeting. I'm sorry I'm not there. I'm stuck in another meeting somewhere, but I'm trying to double task and listen to the discussion here as well. So nothing more to add. And thank you all for the candid conversation and paving the way for us and what we should plan towards the 2026 budget process.
Well, we're glad you're here virtually anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments for Corsa? And we appreciate Maury being here. Maury, anything else you want to say to us this morning? Our County Attorney, Maury Josephson?
Nothing to add at this point. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. I assume, Kate, that you're here about the resolution.
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. We're going to take that next.
Okay.
All right. We have a resolution, budget adjustment, Department of Social Services and Youth Services Department for the Safe Harbor. And does someone want to move that? Deborah's moved it, seconded by Veronica. Who wants to explain this one to us?
I'm happy to talk to it if you'd like.
Why don't you give us a brief introduction?
Sure. So the Safe Harbor funds are funds that come down from the New York State Office of Family and Children's Services and support our work around the sex trafficking of youth. So this amount comes through DSS and is subcontracted through us. We were talking earlier about not knowing the amount of funds sometimes until later in the year. That's the case with this. We guesstimate and try to use last year's amount sort of to put in our budget as a placeholder. We were given the numbers after the budget process was completed, and so this is just an adjustment to put the same, or the actual amount in place of the budget holder that we did put in place, which is exactly the same amount. So it was around 30,000, I believe. So
this is budget neutral?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just accepting the funds.
Okay, anything else? You're ready to vote? Those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yep.
We have a budget adjustment resolution for negotiated salary adjustments. Someone want to move that one? Veronica, seconded by Lee. Who wants to explain that one? Or introduce it? Norma?
Sure. That resolution, this is all of the salary adjustments that were made in the middle. In previous years, we've made the adjustments based on budgets and negotiations. This year, we made adjustments based on what the departments actually were showing as a deficit at the end of the year. So rather than increasing the budget in the middle of the year for just a budgeted number, we waited to see how much money they were in deficit because of vacancies and such, and we're only replacing the funds that are needed to support the budget.
Pages and pages of them.
Pages and pages of them. It was a lot of work.
Lee?
Mike, I just was glancing through, or trying to get a bottom line number, as I always do, and it's based on departments, but I'm looking at it, and it looks like when you add up the pluses, it's about 1.9 million, and then minus is 2.8. So does that mean that we had a less than expected number of adjustments? Are we to the good at the end of the year here?
It's related to what we've been reporting right along is we have had a vacancy factor that we've been taking into consideration. So it is related to that. Yeah. And so which will mean that there's some funding that's still that's still unspent for 2024 because we've moved those funds around.
Yeah, it looks like a fairly healthy amount possibly, but I'm also assuming that we've budgeted at full force going forward.
We did.
So
Yeah, we increased target to accommodate for those changes.
we may have, may
So we
have
might
seen a
not
little bit
hit
of.
target, right?
Pardon?
We may not hit target, is that?
No, I think we saved
We're going to
about $1
be
million.
below target is what I mean.
We will, yes, we'll be below target. That's correct, yes.
Randy?
Yeah, thank you. This looks like an awful lot of work. But it's about balancing your everything, right?
We had a lot of negotiations last year.
Right, yeah.
There was a lot of changes last year, which is why we waited till the end of the year to do it.
So thank you for this. So for some of these negotiations, we had put money in reserve.
Yes.
So would be some of those expenses coming out of that?
Some of it, yes, but just to point out too, that every one of those transactions, somebody in finance has to make.
Right.
So it's a lot of work for me to categorize it. It's a lot of work for them to have to do that transferring because the finance director's been given autonomy to make those changes. But anyway, I'm sorry, Randy, what was your question again?
So I know through some of the negotiations, we put money aside because we assume we're going to settle them at some point. So some of this payments that are being allocated are coming out of that account?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right. And there's some
Not all,
are
but
not.
some.
Right. And keep in mind too, that when we are looking at these, we're only talking about salaries. So within departments, things like mandates that we weren't aware were going to be higher than so there's a lot of moving parts for the end of 2024. Just so while it looks like we have this surplus in fund balance, it's also really, there's also a relationship to the cost of doing business for the year.
Thank you.
Ready to vote? Those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. And we have another resolution, contingent fund appropriation, terminal pay and longevity pay, reimbursement from the Department of Planning and Sustainability. This one says it was something was missed in the budget and we had to pick it up in a contingency, is that right?
No, Katie's here, but this is this is what.
Oh, I see
folks, Katie. Yeah, when folks are, leave employment, we have to pay out the terminal pay. That's what this is about.
Katie, anything you want to say about it?
Yeah, this is just for, can you hear me?
Yes.
I need to move her in a seconder, I'm told. Veronica and Lee. Go ahead.
This is a terminal pay for Joan Jerkowicz, a long-term employee, 33 years with the department. Yeah, that's the only explanation I have for it.
Any questions?
Is Joan fully retired, Katie?
Yep. Her last day was the 21st.
Oh, gosh. She was a real asset to the county.
She's been a remarkable employee.
Yep.
As are all of our employees. Joan was special.
Thank you, Lee.
Yep.
Ready to vote? All in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Any reports from our members? Lee?
Can I just ruminate for a few minutes?
Well, how many is a few?
Just a few. We're all here together, and we've touched on a lot of...
This is your opportunity to do that, yes.
We've touched on a lot of different things today, and I think some of you appear to be on the same wavelength that I am. I think the last month in some of our meetings has been a little, sobering for me, for lack of a better description. But last month, Lori reported on the sales tax, and setting COVID aside, it was one of the few times we didn't meet the target that historically we have, and I don't know where that's going to go. And, we did some work on changes to the revenue stream. Last year, we've bumped up interest earnings, for instance, to more accurately reflect, but we don't know that we want to go much higher than that. Deborah kind of got my attention last week or 2 weeks ago with, or a week ago, I guess it was, with the state of things in Albany and the fact that the governor's put forth a budget that really isn't reflective of any loss of federal funds. And as you know, and I'm not being political or taking one side or another, but it's clear that the revenue streams coming out of Washington and maybe Albany aren't going to be what we've become accustomed to. And you know, Public Works meeting or facilities and infrastructure. I still can't get out of that habit, Mike.
I know, it was Public Works when I joined.
Old dogs.
I was disappointed that we had to put on hold a bridge project in Groton and something that they'd been working on, but the appropriated monies that we had for it were $2 million. When the bids come in, they were $2.7 million. We can't move forward. We've got the airport situation, and all these things keep coming at us, and then, you know, I'm going to ask at the next facilities meeting about what our plan B is, because we've got some, you know, needs as far as moving forward with a homeless shelter or whatever that solution is going to be that could be in the many millions of dollars. And, you know, we've bandied about this number on the center of government building, and I'm not sure we can put that out to bid and fall within the numbers that we've talked about. And I just think that we're going to have a terrible struggle this year. And as we move into the budget process, I'm just wondering if we're going to have to go back to some of the assumptions that we've always worked on, you know, fiscal policy. Are we going to continue to do the set aside on the capital programs and increase it that amount? Are we able to do a number of things? And the last thing that scares the hell out of me, and I think, Deborah, sitting on the board that you're sitting on in another realm, is we're about to get hit over the head with this discussion of living wage. And I can't imagine the compression factor if we suddenly have to start looking at $25 an hour as a base or whatever that may be. And I'm concerned about, I know we had some concerns and wanted to learn more over the next year about how the living wage is calculated, but I'm concerned about how this Tompkins County number really plays out. And if you're giving me a Tompkins County number based on Greater Ithaca 14850 rents and mortgages, that's a lot different than what it is out in 13073 or 13053. And you know, we may have to revisit a few of these things. I'm concerned. It's there's a lot of factors coming at us that we may not be able to move forward. And another thing that I know there's pressure and advocacy on our legislature and among various groups that to keep moving forward on the Green Facilities Initiative. That's the other underscore I've got, is that we went into phase one expecting to spend $7 million. We spent 14. We're at 50% of a quarter of the goals. And I mean,
And the federal funding for that stuff is going to dry up for sure.
yeah. I mean, so I guess we've got our work cut out ahead of us this year, but the revenue stream is here, and I don't know how we're going to achieve everything that we've set out to do. And there's going to be some disappointment or a need to look for some plan Bs if we can't move forward on some of the major projects. But I just want you to know where I'm coming from on this.
Thank you, Lee. And we'll go to Randy, but I just want to say about the living wage things, I think that it needs a real thorough discussion before we jump on that one.
Well, it's ammunition now. I don't mean to call it that, but it's become a point of discussion with your negotiations in another realm.
Yes, the UAW's all over that. It's not helped us at all.
It's very hurtful for the not-for-profits. Randy, I think you had your hand up.
I did. I appreciate that conversation, Lee. And I think that's kind of my point when I was asking about the capital plan. We really need to look at that. And I don't want to, I would really like to see this legislature, because I really do believe we have a strong legislature now with people that are really focused on the right things. And I'd really like to see us to make some of those decisions before this year is over and we have a whole new set of people that aren't going to understand where we were coming from. So I'm really anxious to do that, and it needs to play out.
I'm sorry?
Norma has her hand up digitally now. I don't know how.
Oh, Norma's there. Norma, you want to say something?
Oh, I guess she wants to get in, never mind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, while we're waiting to resolve that, if I may,
Go ahead.
we were addressed by Tom DiNapoli while we were in Albany at NISAC. And he's usually pretty upbeat, but he really did focus on the fact that the sales tax trend is disturbing and is probably going to continue. And given the questions about sales tax, given the questions about federal funding, given the increased cost of things, his message was be really conservative about how you spend and budget for the worst. So, yeah, that's something we need to keep in mind come September.
Norma, did you want to say something to us?
I just wanted to add to Lee's living wage conversation. Not only are we looking at it from a county's perspective, for county departments, but also how this is going to affect our contracts with service providers for the departments. We have folks that are providing critical services for aging population, to youth services that will also be impacted by the living wage, because that's being added to our county contracts as it's within our county contracts to not require, but encourage folks to pay at living wage. I just wanted to make sure that we kept that in mind as well.
Good point. Thank you.
We actually do ask them to certify that they are paying the county wage, and then I think there is an appeal process or a waiver you can ask for, given what the agency may be.
I would just say that. Go ahead.
No, I was just, it's not a requirement. It is but yes, they do have to certify whether or not they're paying a living wage.
I would just want to add that last year during budget process, we had many discussions about fund balance and whether we should be using more of that for tax reduction, for example, or other places. And the other side of the discussion was we need to have a good amount of balance so that if we have something that comes along, as in the past we had the pandemic, for example, and now we've got things happening at the federal level that we have no control over, and at the state level. So protecting ourselves by keeping strong financially continues to be a really, really important goal of this county. Anyone else? Are we done?
I think so.
Thank you all. Thanks everybody who came and talked, and we appreciate it. Makes our work easier. Thank you, Brittany. Thanks, Rob.